Why did World War II happen? World War II happened because a combination of long-term historical problems and short-term political decisions pushed the world into another large-scale conflict. The war was not caused by a single event or one country alone. Instead, it developed from unresolved issues after World War I, economic instability, the rise of aggressive and extremist governments, weak international peacekeeping efforts, and powerful nationalist and ideological beliefs. Together, these factors created a situation in which war became increasingly likely and eventually unavoidable. One of the most important causes of World War II was the aftermath of World War I. Although the fighting ended in 1918, the peace settlement did not create lasting stability. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, placed most of the blame for the war on Germany and punished it severely. Germany lost significant territory, was forced to reduce its military, and had to pay large reparations to the Allied nations. These penalties damaged Germany's economy and deeply humiliated its people. Many Germans believed the treaty was unfair and that their country had been betrayed. This anger and resentment weakened Germany's democratic government and encouraged the growth of extremist political movements that promised to restore national pride and power. Economic problems during the interwar period also played a major role. After a brief recovery in the 1920s, the world was hit by the Great Depression beginning in 1929. This economic crisis caused massive unemployment, poverty, and social unrest across many countries. In Germany, the effects were especially severe because the economy depended heavily on foreign loans and was already strained by reparations payments. As living conditions worsened, people lost faith in democratic leaders who seemed unable to solve economic problems. In this environment, radical parties gained popularity by offering simple solutions and strong leadership. Economic instability did not directly cause war, but it made societies more willing to support aggressive and authoritarian policies. The rise of militaristic and authoritarian regimes was another key factor leading to World War II. In Germany, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party came to power in 1933. Hitler promised to undo the Treaty of Versailles, rebuild the military, and unite all Germans under one powerful nation. His ideology was based on extreme nationalism, racism, and anti-Semitism. He believed that Germans were a superior race and needed more land, known as living space or Lebensraum. This belief encouraged territorial expansion and made war a central part of Nazi policy. Hitler also aimed to eliminate groups he considered enemies, especially Jews, which later led to the Holocaust. Similar developments occurred in other parts of the world. In Italy, Benito Mussolini established a fascist dictatorship that promoted nationalism, military strength, and expansion. Italy invaded Ethiopia in 1935 in an attempt to build a new empire. In Japan, military leaders gained increasing influence over the government. Japan lacked natural resources and believed it needed to expand into neighboring territories to survive economically and become a great power. This led to the invasion of Manchuria in 1931 and later large-scale war with China. These nations viewed war as a legitimate and even necessary way to achieve national goals. Another important reason World War II happened was the failure of international peacekeeping efforts. After World War I, the League of Nations was created to maintain peace and prevent future conflicts. However, the League was weak and lacked the authority to enforce its decisions. It had no military power of its own, and some major nations, including the United States, were not members. When Japan invaded Manchuria and Italy attacked Ethiopia, the League failed to take strong action. These failures showed aggressive countries that they could break international rules without serious consequences, encouraging further expansion and aggression. The policy of appeasement followed by Britain and France also contributed to the outbreak of war. Still traumatized by the devastation of World War I, these countries were determined to avoid another conflict. As a result, they allowed Germany to break the rules of the Treaty of Versailles. Germany rebuilt its army, remilitarized the Rhineland, and annexed Austria in 1938 without facing military opposition. Later that year, Britain and France signed the Munich Agreement, allowing Germany to take the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia. Although appeasement was intended to preserve peace, it ultimately failed. Hitler saw these concessions as signs of weakness and became more confident in pursuing further expansion. Ideology also played a significant role in causing World War II. Fascist ideologies in Germany and Italy promoted extreme nationalism, obedience to authority, and the belief that war was a natural and necessary part of national development. Racism and antisemitism were central to Nazi ideology, leading to discrimination, violence, and genocide. At the same time, fear of communism influenced international politics. Many countries feared the spread of Soviet communism after the Russian Revolution, which sometimes led them to tolerate or support fascist regimes as a lesser evil. These ideological divisions increased tension and mistrust between nations and made peaceful cooperation more difficult. The immediate cause of World War II was Germany's invasion of Poland on September 1, 1939. By this time, Germany had already taken control of Austria and Czechoslovakia, despite promises to stop expanding. Before invading Poland, Germany signed a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union, secretly agreeing to divide parts of Eastern Europe. When Germany attacked Poland, Britain and France realized that appeasement had failed and that Hitler would not stop through diplomacy alone. They declared war on Germany on September 3, 1939, marking the beginning of World War II. Which country started World War II first? World War II is generally considered to have been started by Germany, specifically through its invasion of Poland on September 1, 1939. This event is widely recognized by historians as the official beginning of the war in Europe and, ultimately, a global conflict. However, understanding which country started World War II also requires looking at the broader context, because acts of aggression had already taken place in other parts of the world before 1939. While Germany triggered the formal outbreak of war in Europe, the path to World War II involved multiple countries and years of rising tensions. Germany's invasion of Poland, the official beginning. On September 1, 1939, Nazi Germany, under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, launched a massive military invasion of Poland. German forces used a new military strategy known as Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War, which relied on rapid attacks using tanks, aircraft, and infantry to overwhelm the enemy quickly. Polish defenses were unable to withstand the speed and strength of the German assault. This invasion was a direct violation of international agreements and followed a series of broken promises by Hitler, who had previously claimed that Germany had no further territorial ambitions. Britain and France had pledged to protect Poland if it were attacked. When diplomatic efforts failed to stop Germany, Britain and France declared war on Germany on September 3, 1939. Their declarations marked the official start of World War II in Europe. For this reason, Germany is widely regarded as the country that started World War II. Hitler's goals and responsibility. Germany's responsibility for starting the war is closely tied to Adolf Hitler's ambitions and ideology. Hitler sought to overturn the Treaty of Versailles, which had punished Germany after World War I. He believed the treaty was unfair and humiliating and used it to justify rebuilding Germany's military and expanding its territory. Hitler also promoted the idea of Lebensraum, or living space, arguing that Germany needed to conquer land in Eastern Europe to survive and prosper. Before invading Poland, Germany had already taken several aggressive steps. In 1936, it remilitarized the Rhineland. In 1938, it annexed Austria in an event known as the Anschluss. Later that same year, Germany took control of the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia following the Munich Agreement. In March 1939, Germany occupied the rest of Czechoslovakia. These actions showed a clear pattern of expansion and disregard for international law. The invasion of Poland was the point at which other major powers finally decided that Germany had to be stopped by force. The role of the Soviet Union. Although Germany initiated the invasion of Poland, the Soviet Union also played a significant role in the opening of World War II. Just weeks before the invasion, Germany and the Soviet Union signed the Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact, also known as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. This agreement included a secret clause in which the two countries agreed to divide Eastern Europe between them. On September 17, 1939, while Polish forces were already fighting the German invasion from the west, Soviet troops invaded Poland from the east. Poland was effectively crushed between two powerful armies. Although Britain and France declared war only on Germany and not on the Soviet Union, the Soviet invasion contributed directly to Poland's defeat. While Germany is still considered the primary country that started World War II, the Soviet Union was also complicit in the destruction of Poland and the early stages of the conflict. Japan's earlier aggression in Asia. Some historians argue that World War II began earlier in Asia rather than Europe. In 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria, a region of northeastern China, and established a puppet state called Manchukuo. Later, in 1937, Japan launched a full-scale invasion of China, beginning the Second Sino-Japanese War. This conflict involved massive violence, including atrocities such as the Nanjing Massacre. Japan's actions clearly represented aggressive expansion and violated international norms. However, at the time, these events were viewed as regional conflicts rather than part of a global war. The war in Asia later merged with the European conflict after Japan attacked Western powers, most notably the United States at Pearl Harbor in 1941. Because of this, some scholars consider Japan one of the earliest aggressors of World War II, even though the official global war is usually dated from 1939. Why Germany is most often blamed. Despite Japan's earlier actions, Germany is most commonly identified as the country that started World War II because its invasion of Poland directly caused multiple major powers to declare war, turning a regional conflict into a global one. Germany's aggression forced Britain and France to act, transforming tensions into open warfare between powerful alliances. From that moment onward, the conflict rapidly expanded across Europe and beyond. Germany also played a central role in shaping the Axis alliance, which included Italy and Japan. Hitler's decision set the pace and direction of the war in Europe, leading to invasions across the continent and, eventually, to the Holocaust and widespread destruction. Without Germany's invasion of Poland, World War II in its familiar form may not have begun when it did. Italy's involvement. Italy, led by Benito Mussolini, was another aggressive power, but it did not start World War II. Italy invaded Ethiopia in 1935, demonstrating its imperial ambitions. However, Italy did not formally enter World War II until 1940, after the conflict had already begun. While Italy contributed to the war's expansion, it was not the initial trigger. What were the effects of World War II? World War II had enormous and lasting effects on the world, making it one of the most important events in modern history. Fought between 1939 and 1945, the war involved dozens of countries across Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Pacific. When it ended, the political, economic, social, and moral foundations of the world had been deeply transformed. The effects of World War II were immediate as well as long-term, influencing international relations, national boundaries, societies, and global power structures that continue to shape the world today. One of the most significant effects of World War II was the massive loss of human life. It is estimated that over 60 million people died during the conflict, including soldiers and civilians. Civilians suffered on an unprecedented scale due to aerial bombings, mass executions, forced labor, starvation, and disease. Entire communities were destroyed, and millions of families were left grieving or displaced. The psychological trauma caused by the war affected survivors for decades, leaving deep emotional scars and shaping collective memory in many countries. Another major effect was the widespread destruction of cities and infrastructure. Much of Europe and parts of Asia were left in ruins. Cities such as Warsaw, Berlin, Dresden, Tokyo, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki experienced extensive destruction. Roads, bridges, railways, factories, and homes were damaged or completely destroyed, causing severe housing shortages and economic disruption. Agricultural production declined in many regions, leading to food shortages and famine. Rebuilding required enormous financial resources and international cooperation, and recovery took many years. The war also had profound moral and humanitarian consequences, particularly due to the Holocaust and other war crimes. Nazi Germany carried out the systematic genocide of approximately 6 million Jews, along with millions of others including Roma, disabled individuals, political opponents, and prisoners of war. The discovery of concentration and extermination camps shocked the world and exposed the horrific consequences of racism, antisemitism, and totalitarian rule. In response, the international community conducted the Nuremberg trials to prosecute leading Nazi officials for crimes against humanity, establishing important principles of international law and accountability. Politically, World War II dramatically reshaped global power structures. Before the war, European nations such as Britain, France, and Germany dominated world affairs. After the war, Europe was weakened economically and militarily. In contrast, the United States and the Soviet Union emerged as the two main superpowers. This shift in power led to the Cold War, a long period of political and ideological rivalry between the capitalist West, led by the United States, and the Communist East, led by the Soviet Union. Although this rivalry did not result in direct war between the two superpowers, it influenced global politics for decades through proxy wars, alliances, and nuclear arms competition. World War II also led to significant changes in national borders and governments. Germany was divided into East and West Germany, and Berlin itself was split. Many Eastern European countries came under Soviet influence and established communist governments. Japan lost its overseas empire and was placed under American occupation, during which it adopted a democratic constitution and reformed its political system. In several countries, old regimes collapsed and new political systems were introduced in an effort to prevent future aggression and dictatorship. The war resulted in the creation of international organizations designed to promote peace and cooperation. In 1945, the United Nations, UN, was established to replace the League of Nations, which had failed to prevent World War II. The UN aimed to resolve international disputes through diplomacy, promote human rights, and encourage economic and social development. Other international institutions, such as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, IMF, were also created to promote economic stability and cooperation. Economically, World War II had devastating short-term effects but also contributed to long-term transformation. Many countries faced economic collapse immediately after the war due to destroyed industries and infrastructure. However, large-scale reconstruction efforts led to economic growth and modernization. One of the most significant initiatives was the Marshall Plan, through which the United States provided financial aid to Western European countries. This program helped rebuild economies, reduce poverty, and stabilize political systems, contributing to long-term prosperity in many regions. Socially, the war brought major changes to gender roles and civil rights. With millions of men serving in the military, women entered the workforce in large numbers, working in factories, offices, and other essential industries. This shift challenged traditional gender roles and laid the foundation for later movements for women's rights. Minority groups who contributed to the war effort also began to demand greater equality and civil rights, leading to social change in many countries in the post-war period. Another important effect of World War II was the acceleration of decolonization. European colonial powers were weakened by the war and could no longer maintain control over their colonies. At the same time, people in colonized regions demanded independence, inspired by ideas of self-determination and freedom. In the decades following the war, many countries in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East gained independence, reshaping global politics and ending centuries of colonial rule. World War II also had a lasting impact on science and technology. The demands of war led to rapid technological advancements in areas such as aviation, medicine, communications, and computing. One of the most significant developments was the creation of nuclear weapons, demonstrated by the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The existence of nuclear weapons changed the nature of warfare and introduced the constant threat of nuclear destruction, especially during the Cold War. Which country ended World War II? World War II, fought from 1939 to 1945, was the largest and most destructive conflict in human history. It involved dozens of countries across Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Pacific, and resulted in immense human suffering and political transformation. Because of its global scale and complexity, the question which country ended World War II does not have a simple, single-country answer. Instead, the war ended through the combined actions of multiple Allied nations, with different countries playing decisive roles in different regions. The end of the war occurred in two main stages: the defeat of Nazi Germany in Europe and the surrender of Imperial Japan in the Pacific. The end of World War II in Europe. The European phase of World War II officially ended on May 7, 1945, when Nazi Germany surrendered unconditionally to the Allied forces. The surrender took effect on May 8, 1945, a date celebrated as Victory in Europe Day, VE Day, in many countries. No single country ended the war in Europe alone. Instead, victory was achieved by the combined military efforts of the Allied powers, most notably the Soviet Union, the United States, the United Kingdom, and France. The role of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union played the most significant role in defeating Germany on the Eastern Front. From 1941 onward, the Red Army bore the brunt of Nazi Germany's military power. Key battles such as the Battle of Stalingrad, 1942 to 1943, and the Battle of Kursk, 1943, marked major turning points in the war. By pushing German forces steadily westward, the Soviet Union inflicted devastating losses on the German army. In April 1945, Soviet troops launched the Battle of Berlin, capturing the German capital after intense fighting. Adolf Hitler committed suicide on April 30, 1945, as Soviet forces closed in. The fall of Berlin was a decisive moment that directly led to Germany's surrender. For this reason, many historians argue that the Soviet Union played the single largest role in ending the war in Europe. The role of the United States and Western allies. While the Soviet Union fought in the East, the United States, United Kingdom, and other Western allies fought Germany in Western Europe and North Africa. The most famous Western operation was the D-Day invasion, June 6, 1944, when Allied forces landed in Normandy, France. This opened a second front against Germany and forced it to fight on multiple fronts. American industrial power, military resources, and manpower were crucial to sustaining the Allied war effort. The United States also provided extensive economic and military aid to its allies through programs such as Lend-Lease, which supplied weapons, vehicles, food, and fuel. By early 1945, Western Allied forces had crossed the Rhine River and advanced deep into Germany. Their coordination with Soviet forces ensured that Germany was completely surrounded and unable to continue fighting. The end of World War II in the Pacific. The war did not end with Germany's defeat. In the Pacific, fighting between the Allied powers and Imperial Japan continued until later in 1945. The Pacific War officially ended when Japan surrendered on September 2, 1945. The role of the United States. The United States played the dominant role in ending the war against Japan. After Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, the United States became fully involved in the conflict. Over the next several years, U.S. forces fought a series of brutal island battles, including Midway, Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. In August 1945, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima, August 6, and Nagasaki, August 9. These bombings caused unprecedented destruction and loss of life. Faced with the prospect of further atomic attacks and invasion, Japan announced its surrender on August 15, 1945. Japan formally signed the surrender documents aboard the U.S. battleship USS Missouri on September 2, 1945. This event is widely regarded as the official end of World War II. The role of the Soviet Union in Japan's defeat. The Soviet Union also played an important role in Japan's surrender. In August 1945, shortly after Germany's defeat, The Soviet Union declared war on Japan and launched a massive invasion of Japanese-held territories in Manchuria. The rapid destruction of Japan's forces there removed any hope Japan had of negotiating a favorable end to the war. Many historians believe that the combination of the atomic bombings and the Soviet invasion convinced Japan's leaders that surrender was unavoidable. Why no single country ended World War II? World War II was a global conflict, and its conclusion was the result of collective Allied effort, not the action of one country alone. Different nations contributed in different but essential ways. The Soviet Union destroyed the majority of Germany's military forces. The United States provided decisive military power, industrial capacity, and leadership in both Europe and the Pacific. The United Kingdom resisted Germany from the early years of the war and helped coordinate Allied strategy. China tied down large Japanese forces for years. France, Canada, Australia, and many other nations contributed troops, resources, and resistance movements. Because the war ended at different times in different regions, it is more accurate to say that World War II ended through Allied cooperation, rather than being ended by a single country. Which country won World War II? World War II, fought from 1939 to 1945, was the most extensive and destructive conflict in human history. It involved more than 30 countries and was fought across Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Pacific Ocean. Given the scale and complexity of the war, the question which country won World War II cannot be answered by naming a single nation. Instead, World War II was won by a group of countries known collectively as the Allied powers, who defeated the Axis powers. The victory was the result of cooperation, sacrifice, and combined military strength rather than the achievement of one country alone. The Allied powers, the winners of World War II. The Allied powers were the group of countries that fought against the Axis powers, primarily Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and Imperial Japan. The most important Allied nations were the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, China, France. These 5 countries are often referred to as the Big Five Allies. Together, they coordinated military strategy, shared resources, and fought on multiple fronts, eventually leading to the defeat of the Axis powers in both Europe and Asia. Victory in Europe, defeating Nazi Germany. The war in Europe ended with the defeat of Nazi Germany in May 1945. This victory was the result of joint efforts by the Soviet Union and the Western Allies. The Soviet Union's contribution. The Soviet Union played a decisive role in winning World War II in Europe. After being invaded by Germany in 1941, the Soviet Union engaged the majority of the German army on the Eastern Front. Battles such as the Battle of Stalingrad, Battle of Kursk, and the Siege of Leningrad caused enormous losses for Germany. The Red Army pushed German forces back across Eastern Europe and ultimately captured Berlin in April 1945. This led directly to the suicide of Adolf Hitler and Germany's unconditional surrender. The Soviet Union suffered the highest number of casualties of any country in the war, demonstrating the scale of its contribution to victory. The United States and Western Europe. The United States and United Kingdom played key roles in Western Europe. The most important event was the D-Day invasion on June 6, 1944, when Allied forces landed in Normandy, France. This opened a second front and forced Germany to fight on multiple fronts simultaneously. American industrial strength was crucial. The United States produced massive amounts of weapons, vehicles, aircraft, and supplies, not only for its own forces but also for its allies. This economic power gave the Allies a decisive advantage over Germany. By early 1945, Allied forces from the West and Soviet forces from the East closed in on Germany, making defeat inevitable. Victory in the Pacific, defeating Japan. While Germany was defeated in Europe, the war continued in Asia and the Pacific against Imperial Japan. The country most responsible for victory in this region was the United States, supported by other Allied nations. The United States' role. After Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941, the United States became fully involved in the Pacific War. Over the next 4 years, American forces fought their way across the Pacific using a strategy known as island hopping. Key battles included Midway, Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. In August 1945, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These bombings caused massive destruction and demonstrated overwhelming military power. Faced with the threat of continued devastation, Japan announced its surrender. Japan formally surrendered on September 2, 1945, officially ending World War II. The Soviet Union and China in Asia. The Soviet Union also contributed to Japan's defeat by invading Japanese-controlled Manchuria in August 1945 and rapidly destroying Japanese forces there. China, which had been fighting Japan since 1937, played an important role by tying down millions of Japanese troops, preventing them from being used elsewhere. Why no single country won World War II? Although the United States and the Soviet Union emerged as the two most powerful nations after the war, it would be incorrect to say that either country alone won World War II. The war was won through coalition warfare, where each Allied country made unique and essential contributions. The Soviet Union destroyed most of Germany's military forces. The United States provided unmatched industrial power and led the war in the Pacific. The United Kingdom resisted Germany from the beginning and served as a base for Allied operations. China weakened Japan through prolonged resistance. France and other Allied nations contributed troops, resistance movements, and strategic support. Victory depended on cooperation, coordination, and shared sacrifice. Aftermath. Who benefited most from victory? While the Allies collectively won the war, the post-war world was dominated by two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Both emerged stronger economically and militarily, while much of Europe and Asia lay in ruins. The victory led to major global changes, including the creation of the United Nations, the beginning of the Cold War, the decline of European colonial empires, the rise of the United States and Soviet Union as global leaders. What was left after the end of World War II? World War II ended in 1945, leaving behind a world deeply transformed by 6 years of global conflict. The war caused unprecedented destruction, loss of life, and social upheaval. When the fighting stopped, much of the world lay in ruins, millions of people were displaced, and political systems were reshaped. The aftermath of World War II affected every aspect of human life: economic, political, social, and psychological. What was left after the war was not only physical devastation but also a new global order that continues to influence the world today. Human loss and suffering. One of the most devastating legacies of World War II was the immense loss of human life. An estimated 60 to 70 million people were killed, including soldiers and civilians. Entire families were wiped out, and many survivors were left physically injured or psychologically traumatized. The war also exposed humanity to extreme cruelty. The Holocaust resulted in the systematic murder of 6 million Jews, along with millions of others such as Roma people, disabled individuals, and political prisoners. Survivors of concentration camps were left weak, homeless, and deeply scarred by their experiences. Millions of people were displaced across Europe and Asia. Refugees wandered across borders in search of food, shelter, and lost family members. Many had no homes to return to, as cities and villages had been destroyed. Physical destruction of cities and infrastructure. At the end of World War II, much of Europe and Asia lay in ruins. Cities such as Berlin, Warsaw, Dresden, Tokyo, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki were heavily destroyed by bombing. Roads, bridges, railways, factories, and ports were damaged or completely destroyed. Housing shortages were severe. Millions of people lived among rubble or in temporary shelters. Essential services such as electricity, clean water, and transportation were disrupted, making daily life extremely difficult. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki left long-lasting damage. Entire cities were flattened, and survivors suffered from radiation sickness, burns, and genetic damage. These bombings also introduced the world to the terrifying power of nuclear weapons. Economic ruin and poverty. The global economy was left in a state of collapse. Many countries faced severe inflation, unemployment, and shortages of food and raw materials. Agricultural land had been damaged by fighting, and factories that once produced goods now lay in ruins. Europe was particularly affected. Industrial production dropped sharply, and many countries depended on foreign aid to survive. Rationing of food and basic goods continued for years after the war in many regions. To address this crisis, the United States introduced the Marshall Plan, which provided financial assistance to help rebuild Western European economies. This aid played a crucial role in economic recovery and stability. Political changes and new global powers. The end of World War II dramatically reshaped global politics. Traditional European powers such as Britain and France were weakened, while two new superpowers emerged, the United States and the Soviet Union. This shift led to the beginning of the Cold War, a period of tension and rivalry between the capitalist West and the communist East. Although the two sides did not fight directly, their ideological conflict influenced global politics for decades. Many countries in Eastern Europe came under Soviet influence, while Western Europe aligned more closely with the United States. Germany was divided into East and West, symbolizing the deep political division of the post-war world. Creation of international organizations. In response to the devastation of World War II, nations sought ways to prevent future global conflicts. This led to the creation of the United Nations, UN, in 1945. The UN aimed to promote peace, security, and cooperation among nations. Other institutions such as the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank were established to promote economic stability and development. These organizations became central to global governance and recovery efforts. The war also resulted in war crimes trials, most notably the Nuremberg trials, where leading Nazi officials were prosecuted for crimes against humanity. These trials set important legal precedents for international law. Social and cultural changes. World War II brought major changes to societies around the world. Traditional gender roles shifted as women had taken on jobs in factories, offices, and farms during the war. After the war, many women demanded greater rights and opportunities. The war also increased awareness of human rights. The horrors of genocide and mass violence led to the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. Education, science, and technology advanced rapidly as a result of wartime innovation. Developments in medicine, aviation, and communications were later adapted for civilian use. Psychological and moral impact. Beyond physical destruction, World War II left deep psychological scars. Survivors struggled with grief, trauma, and guilt. Entire generations were shaped by memories of violence, loss, and fear. The war forced humanity to confront difficult moral questions about genocide, nuclear weapons, and total warfare. These questions continue to influence ethical debates today.